I'm Baglio, and I'm the founder and director of Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop, and I recently taught a one-day workshop on flash fiction, which is usually defined as fiction under 1,000 words. So there are many reasons why I love flash fiction. The best flash stories are satisfying in a way that longer stories are, and they often offer a glimpse into something much larger than themselves. In such small spaces, the best flash stories can really evoke complex characters, complete worlds, and lots of clear themes and motifs, and they do this all with very quick, deliberate brushstrokes. And I often find that I'm thinking about these very tiny stories days, weeks, years later. But more than just how enjoyable flash fiction can be to read, I really believe that rigorously writing flash can make you a better writer. It offers a lot of opportunity to practice your own editing skills, which will really benefit everything you write. So the first step to writing flash fiction, like writing anything else, is to forget everything about word count and revision and editing and just let your first draft happen in whatever length and form that it comes out. Try to remove all judgment during this part of the process. You don't want to be editing and critiquing yourself when you're in a generative phase. You need to just let the ideas come out initially, whatever form they do. So once you have words on paper, then you want to figure out if flash fiction is the right form for this particular story. So some ideas will work better as flash fiction than others. Some ideas just feel too expansive, too novel-like in scope, and you might have to significantly alter those ideas to make them work as a flash story. Often great flash focuses on small, somewhat subtle epiphanies, though it can also cover something like a whole life from beginning, middle to end. So the structure can change from one successful piece of flash to the next, but a lot of times what they have in common is a very clear, cohesive kernel of an idea at their core that feels very tangible. So when I teach this workshop, one of the most common questions I get from students is, once you've decided that a certain story is going to be flash fiction and you know this will work as flash, or you think it will, you have the first draft in all its rough glory, how do you know what words to cut? How do you go about polishing this down? So flash relies on a leanness and compression that can feel very difficult to do well. So in answer to this question, I'm going to share a few tips with you that I use when I write flash and that we discussed in this workshop. So before anything else, make sure you give yourself more than just a few drafts. So to write really powerful flash fiction, you'll probably need many, many drafts. I've seen students write 3 or 4 drafts and think the piece is done, but because it's such a short form and because it's so unforgiving, every word really has to be there for a reason. And this kind of meticulous revising and polishing doesn't usually happen overnight in a few drafts. So get comfortable with the idea of many drafts. I sometimes go through 20 or more drafts when working on a piece of flash fiction, and I save all my drafts in an organized way, which allows me to experiment and try new approaches without the fear of losing my previous draft. And because you're working with a shorter form, the idea of many drafts shouldn't be as scary or intimidating as it might be with novels or even short stories. So next, figure out what's at the heart of your story. This is a really important thing for flash writers to think about, since there's no room, as I said, in flash for the kind of meandering that can really happen in longer works. Ask yourself, what's the most interesting part of the story for you? Why are you writing this? What are you trying to convey? What's the most essential part of this story? So you should be able to articulate that clearly in a sentence or two. And if it's vague or confusing to you, then it might come off that way also to the reader. But once you figure out what the heart of your story is, it will really direct you very clearly toward what to cut and what to leave. And once you've made the big decisions about what scenes, characters, and narrative events to show in your story, then you can start fine-tuning, the fun part, the polishing and tweaking. So because flash is so compressed, everything in your story has to earn its place there, as we've said. So give yourself permission to cut any word or phrase that isn't doing essential work for your story, such as moving plot along or developing character. So ideally, you want every sentence to do multiple things at once, which adds to that rich, layered quality of really good flash fiction. If you find sentences that only do one thing, for example, if they just describe setting or character, they can often be cut or combined. For an example of this, check out the flash fiction story Spaceman by Kathy Fish. You can read it online at fictionaut.com. And when you read it, notice how much happens in just the first few lines. We get character, but also a relationship between two characters, a setting, a situation, but not just any situation, a super high stakes one. This kind of density comes from lots of honing, combining, and cutting whatever is not essential. It doesn't come out this way in the first draft. Another great technique for revising your flash stories is to read them out loud to yourself or to someone else. A lot of times when we hear something out loud, a different, more objective critic is triggered in us, and we start getting a little more rigorous with our own writing. So sometimes when I read something out loud to myself, I know immediately what words or phrases I resist saying out loud, and then I know that's a good place to cut or rework. So flash fiction in particular relies heavily on rhythm, the right balance between sentences, words, sounds, and it's really important to develop your ear to pick up on these nuances, and reading out loud is a great way to develop that. Finally, are you beginning and ending your flash stories in the right places? Beginnings and endings are really good places to look for extra words to cut. Often we tend to write our way into a story since we don't always know from the start what the most compelling beginning is. So to make your flash stories as tight as possible, see what you can cut from the opening and concluding lines. I like to begin as close to the introduction of conflict as possible. Also, it's often a good choice to end your flash stories before the full resolution, which can help the story feel slightly open even as it resolves. So remember that flash fiction is a very crafted form of storytelling that requires a lot of meticulous, detail-oriented work. No one writes flawless flash fiction in the first draft, but the good news is that there is no rush. You can write as many drafts as you need to get your story as polished as possible. And while you're writing to further study, make sure you're reading as much flash fiction as you can. There are many free journals out there online. You can read lots of flash fiction online, and also many great print journals as well. So I hope this was helpful, and good luck with your flash fiction.